It seems to happen like clockwork. As soon as a warranty runs out, things break and they're no longer covered. When your car is in that situation, though, you could be staring down thousands of dollars in repair bills. CarShield begins where your warranty ends, with service plans that cover those expensive surprises. They pay your favorite mechanic or dealership directly, making the entire process fast and easy. Get a free quote by calling 800-416-6522 or visit carshield.com to get your free quote.
Up next, the secret life of a call girl. Often a very dangerous profession.
They found a female face down, didn't appear to have any signs of life.
She would be a natural target because she would usually have significant amounts of cash on her person.
The evidence points to one man.
Looks like Rambo, acts like Rambo, and dresses like Rambo. It may be Rambo.
Until one tiny clue turns the case around. It was after midnight on a chilly March evening when Virginia Russell was driving home from a party with her boyfriend, Rodney Hartman. The couple had been dating for 3 years and were talking about getting married. But on this night, tragedy struck.
She was thrown from the car. The car flipped like 8 times, and they were both ejected from the car.
When an ambulance arrived, they pronounced Rodney Hartman dead at the scene. Virginia was rushed to the hospital. For 48 hours, Virginia hovered between life and death, but she survived. Toxicology tests showed Virginia had a blood alcohol level of 0.16, almost twice the legal limit.
They had charged her with the felony DUI.
Virginia was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in prison for vehicular homicide.
It was hard enough that she had lost somebody in her life, and then to be doing time for it and be taken away from her family again. I mean, it was a very difficult time for Virginia.
When Virginia was released from prison, she told her family she found work cleaning houses. One evening, while spending time with her family, Virginia got a message on her pager at 8:54 p.m.
Yeah, I can do that.
We asked her where she was going, and she tells us that she has to go clean a house for an individual. We said our goodbyes and hugged her and told her we loved her. And she told us as well. And that was the last time.
Early the next morning, a man walking his dog found a woman's body near an athletic field in Rosewood, South Carolina. The victim had been shot 3 times, execution style, in the head. 2 shell casings were found nearby. Fingerprints identified the victim as Virginia Russell.
Pretty shocking, absolutely. She hadn't been out 2 months when this incident happened.
She was missing her right shoe. There was no dirt or debris on her foot, but her stockings were ripped, and she had scrapes on her knees. The missing shell casing indicated Virginia may have been shot once in another location and then dragged to where she was shot 2 more times.
There's obviously more to this homicide than just this one particular location where the body was found.
Police found 2 empty beer bottles 20 feet from Virginia's body. No one was sure if they were connected to the murder. They also found a single hair on Virginia's body.
As we do at all crime scenes, we collected everything that we could possibly collect.
There was no sign of sexual assault, but 2 purses were found near the body.
There weren't but $2 and change in the purses, so investigators believe that part of the motive may have been robbery.
A background check stunned Virginia's family. Her real profession wasn't cleaning houses. She was a call girl.
It was a total shock. But then again, I guess Virginia had to do what she needed to do because it was very difficult for her to find work because of her background.
As the family coped with the tragedy, investigators were forced to deal with a problem of their own. Virginia's profession meant a large list of potential suspects. Investigators found Virginia Russell's car in an abandoned parking lot 2 miles from the location of her body. There was a single shell casing inside.
Obviously, she was initially shot in the vehicle. You could see the blood spatter that went throughout the car, consistent with her having been shot in the head.
On the passenger floorboard, spattered with blood, was a potential clue.
We found a 6-pack of Michelob beer that the carton was still there, but it had one bottle, full bottle, still left in the carton.
This was the same brand of beer as the 2 beer bottles found near Virginia's body. Blood inside the door confirmed Virginia had been dragged from the car. Her missing shoe was on the driver's side floorboard. In a search for Virginia's killer, investigators wanted to know who had paged her on the night of her death. The call was traced to this apartment, rented by 27-year-old Justin Bullard, who owned an aquarium cleaning business. Justin Bullard denied any involvement in the murder and said he never met Virginia. He had no criminal history.
Mr. Bullard's alibi was he was at home alone. And the problem with that was him being home alone and no one else to corroborate him being there at the time.
With a search warrant, investigators found a wealth of evidence inside his apartment.
We find in his apartment a .380 caliber pistol.
The pistol registered to Justin Bullard was apparently the same caliber as the gun used in Virginia's murder. And investigators found something else.
There are several pages ripped out of the phone book, and each of those pages relate to escort services and phone numbers for escort services.
On a pair of Bullard's boots, analysts noticed some slight discoloration. The boots were examined under a microscope. They were stained with what appeared to be high-impact blood spatter.
High-impact spatter might be invisible. If the surface that it's deposited on is absorbent or dark in color, it's very likely that it would be very difficult to simply visualize it.
DNA tests on the bloody boots tied them to Virginia's murder.
The swabs were subjected to PCR testing, and the results came back consistent with the victim.
Whoever was wearing those boots was probably in contact with the victim at the time she was murdered.
Next, investigators tested Bullard's handgun.
The firearm that was submitted to me was a Russian-manufactured Makarov semi-automatic pistol, chambered to fire .380 auto-caliber ammunition.
Shell casings from the crime scene and casings from a test firing of the gun were examined with a comparison microscope. Viewed side by side, the shell casings left no doubt the murder weapon was Justin Bullard's gun.
The boots were Mr. Bullard's. The gun was Mr. Bullard's. The last phone call from the victim was to Mr. Bullard's apartment.
But despite the overwhelming evidence, Bullard not only denied he was the killer, he came up with the incredible tale that someone must have stolen all his things, committed the crime, then returned them.
This program is brought to you by Generation Y, a podcast from Wondery. Imagine you have two friends who are obsessed with stories of crime, murder, and unsolved mysteries. That is Generation Y, a podcast where hosts Aaron and Justin explore theories, dive into forensic evidence, and share their opinions. In an all-new episode, Generation Y examines the case of Jonathan Amaral, a 25-year-old biomedical engineer in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. One weekend, he goes off on a hiking trip. He never comes back. After Jonathan fails to show up for work, his mother finds out and reports him missing. That same day, Brittany Barron, who is 31 and one of Jonathan's coworkers, calls in to quit her job, and now she's missing too. Jonathan and Brittany are rumored to be having an affair. So did the two run off together, or has something more sinister happened? Listen to the Generation Y podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or you can listen 1 week early and ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app.
The prime suspect in Virginia Russell's murder was Justin Bullard. Inside Bullard's apartment, investigators found all the evidence they needed for a conviction. Virginia's blood was found on Bullard's boots. His handgun was the murder weapon. Names and phone numbers of escort services were near his telephone. And Virginia Russell was paged from Bullard's phone just hours before her murder.
Looks like Rambo, acts like Rambo, and dresses like Rambo. It may be Rambo.
Bullard claimed a roommate might have committed this crime with items taken from his apartment. Bullard said he had allowed a friend to live with him temporarily because the electricity in his friend's apartment had been turned off due to lack of payment. As preposterous as this seemed, it took on more significance when prosecutor Knox McMahon learned of a similar crime that happened 3 days before Virginia's death. A call girl went to an apartment to meet a client. She said there were no lights on in the apartment, only candles.
Did you call for a date?
The client wouldn't identify himself, but asked her to undress. Then, without warning, he pulled a knife and demanded money.
He then tells her to run and don't look back. She's only partially clothed.
The apartment was leased to a known drug addict, Roy Beck. But was he the perpetrator? The victim was shown a photo lineup.
She positively identified Roy Beck. The physical description she gave fit Roy Beck.
That's the guy.
It did not fit Mr. Bullard.
Coincidentally, Roy Beck was the friend Justin Bullard said was living with him at the time of Virginia Russell's murder. That meant 2 suspects were staying in the apartment that was the source of all the evidence in Virginia Russell's murder. There was no root on the hair found on Virginia's body, so scientists couldn't perform genetic DNA testing. All analysts could say was that visually it looked more similar to Beck's hair than Bullard's. But inside Roy Beck's apartment, the one with no electricity that the call girl visited, police found a potential clue.
We found 3 bottles of Michelob beer.
So now you have 2 Michelob Light beer at the body scene, 1 unopened, and a carton in Virginia Russell's car, and 3 at Beck's unpowered apartment.
Scientists swabbed the beer bottles from the murder scene, looking for a possible connection. Unfortunately, they didn't find enough saliva or skin cells to generate a DNA profile.
Testing for saliva at that time on the mouth of a beer bottle wasn't as commonly done as it is today.
The bottles were then subjected to superglue fuming. These fumes will adhere to finger oils and often produce quality prints.
Glass is a very smooth surface, and the residue that builds up on the ridges in the fingers and in the palms of the hands easily will transfer from the surface of the hand onto a glass surface, and that glass surface will hold it.
After 15 minutes in the fuming chamber, 1 partial palm print emerged on one of the bottles found near Virginia's body. This partial print didn't match Virginia Russell, Justin Bullard, or Roy Beck.